Scary Camping Stories in Japan. Story 1. This is a true experience from my student days. At the time, I participated in the Boy Scouts in Aichi Prefecture. Our troop had an annual tradition of camping at the base of Mount Ontake, a location spanning Nagano and Gifu prefectures. Mount Ontake is also one of Japan's 3 sacred mountains and a place with supernatural significance. As part of our tradition, we held a formal campfire gathering one evening. Nearly 100 people attended, and the central bonfire blazed atop a 1-meter-high platform. The surrounding area became brilliantly lit after the fire was kindled. During the event, I noticed a man standing in the shadows of the nearby forest, watching us. Considering the vast size of the campsite and the many other campers around, I assumed he was just another participant. However, as others began discussing the mysterious man, I realized that several people had seen him as well. The next day, my companions and I ventured to the spot where the man had stood the previous night. To our surprise, behind the row of trees lay a steep slope resembling a cliff. There was barely enough space for anyone to stand there. As we discussed the incident, someone mentioned that the man's attire resembled military clothing from a past war. But what truly disturbed us was that none of us could recall his face. We all shared a vague impression of his features. It led me to wonder if the man was some sort of apparition. What emotions or intentions had he harbored while observing our campfire gathering? As we reminisced about the camping trip, we realized that other strange occurrences had taken place. Some saw a transparent white serpent, while others encountered a dark figure in the river. Despite these eerie events, our fascination with the experience overshadowed any intense fear. For me, it remains a beautiful memory, albeit an inexplicable camping adventure. Story 2. A few years ago, my friends and I went camping by a pond in the mountains. It was nighttime, and we sat around the campfire. Suddenly, I heard a woman's voice coming from the pond, shouting for help. "Help! Someone over there! Save me!" I turned toward the sound and saw a woman struggling in the water, drowning. Shocked, I stood up, ready to rush over and assist. But my friend grabbed my shoulder, urging me to stay calm. He reminded me that it was too far to see clearly, especially in the darkness. How could I make out her face from this distance? Despite his advice, I continued to observe. The woman had stopped struggling and now floated with her upper body exposed. Her eyes were fixed on us, and the atmosphere grew eerie. The air felt heavy, and an odd, foul smell hung around us. What struck me as even stranger was the faint light illuminating her face. The pond's center should have been pitch black, yet this peculiar glow revealed her features distinctly. Her expression seemed angry, and I couldn't tear my eyes away. Suddenly, black liquid oozed from her eyes, nostrils, and mouth. Fear crawled over my skin, and my scalp tingled. I was paralyzed, unable to move. As I stared at her, my head throbbed, and my consciousness blurred. Just then, my friend shook me awake. His urgent voice snapped me back. We quickly packed our belongings, avoiding looking in her direction. During our hasty cleanup, I sensed eyes watching us. Eventually, we left safely, driving down to a convenience store parking lot where we spent the night. On the way back, my friend and I discussed what we had encountered. He couldn't identify the entity, but he was certain it wasn't human. Its expression indicated danger. Reflecting on the incident, I felt fortunate that my friend had shaken me awake. If my consciousness had continued to fade, who knows what might have happened. Story 3. Decades ago, when I was still young, I had a bizarre and perilous experience while camping. 3 friends and I decided to go camping together. Back then, camping was relatively unfamiliar, and there were few established campgrounds. Most people simply found picturesque spots in nature and set up camp. Moreover, the majority of us had little awareness of the potential dangers in the natural environment. On this particular occasion, my friends suggested that we venture to an uninhabited location for our camping trip. So, the 4 of us piled into a car and headed to the mountainous region of Nagano Prefecture in Japan. We followed a small road along a tributary of a river, gradually leaving civilization behind. The road transitioned from asphalt to an unpaved dirt path. Fueled by our adventurous spirit, we continued onward until the car could go no further. We found a slightly open area on the riverbank below the road and decided to set up camp there. After pitching our tents, we swam and fished in the river, enjoying the day. As the sun dipped below the horizon, we lit a campfire and prepared dinner. After our meal, the 4 of us sat leisurely around the fire, sharing funny anecdotes and passing the time. Late into the night, only my friend Tagaki and I remained by the campfire. We sipped beer and exchanged silly jokes. Around midnight, we retreated to our tent to rest. However, as I settled into my sleeping bag, I heard an unsettling sound. It seemed to come from the direction of the riverbank. I asked Tagaki if he heard it, but he didn't respond. Assuming he was already asleep, I listened carefully. The voice belonged to a young man, and though it grew clearer, I couldn't understand what he was saying. Curious and concerned, I wondered why we would encounter another camper in such a remote location. Could there be a nearby village? But it was hard to imagine any inhabited areas in this rugged terrain. Driven by curiosity, I grabbed a flashlight and stepped out of the tent. As I shone the light across the river, the sound vanished, leaving only the gentle flow of water. Perplexed, I continued toward the source of the sound. Suddenly, from upstream, I heard the same voice again. I followed it, hoping to find its origin. After walking a short distance, the sound abruptly ceased, plunging me into darkness. The eerie silence unsettled me. Then my ears began to ring intensely. The river's upstream direction echoed with cries for help. The voices seemed to follow the water's flow, rapidly approaching. I aimed my flashlight upstream and saw several people struggling against the swift current. They looked familiar. They were my friends. As they swept past me, their faces expressionless, the last person shouted urgently, "Run!" His face mirrored mine. I was staring at myself. Shocked, I lost my balance and accidentally stepped into the icy water. At that moment, the entire scene vanished, leaving me bewildered. I raced back to the tent, noticing that the river had turned murky, carrying debris. When I reached our campsite, I heard a thunderous roar from upstream. I didn't know what caused it, but instinct screamed danger. I woke my friends, panic in my eyes, and urged them to flee. Without hesitation, they followed me uphill toward our parked car. As we reached higher ground, the riverbed below erupted with a massive surge of water. Our flashlight revealed our tent being mercilessly swept away by the torrent, along with branches and debris. We sat on the ground, breathless, realizing we had narrowly escaped disaster. Later, I researched similar incidents and discovered that people camping on riverbeds were often swept away by sudden floods. The ominous roar we heard was not a supernatural entity, but the sound of a flash flood. Reflecting on our ignorance, I realized how dangerous it could be. To this day, I wonder why I experienced those hallucinations. If I hadn't investigated, we might have become trapped in the rocky crevices, lifeless bodies carried away by the water. Story 4. This is an incident I encountered 3 years ago. As someone who enjoys solo camping, I decided to venture into the wilderness due to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, which had caused many campsites to close. I set off for a remote mountain in Yamanashi Prefecture, Japan. Arriving at my destination around 1:00 p.m., I found myself surrounded by dense forest and breathtaking views. As I chose a spot to pitch my tent, I noticed a river called Dojigawa nearby. The atmosphere felt pleasant, making it an ideal place to camp. I set up my tent, lit a campfire, and brewed some coffee. After a brief rest, I began preparing dinner. Although it wasn't yet dusk, I wanted to be ready ahead of time. As evening approached, I sat in my chair, listening to my favorite music and soaking in nature's beauty. By 8:00 p.m., an unusual chill settled around me. While temperature fluctuations were common during this season, this cold felt different. Checking my watch, I realized it was nearly 9:00 p.m., so I decided to retire to my tent for the night. I extinguished the campfire and entered the tent. To my surprise, the tent floor was damp, not from frost, but as if water had been splashed. Everything, from the floor to my sleeping bag, was wet. Puzzled, I stepped outside, and that's when I saw it, a shadowy figure standing in the middle of Dojigawa. As I laid eyes on this person-like silhouette, my entire body suddenly froze. I stood rigid, able to breathe and move my eyes, but utterly powerless otherwise. Panic surged through me, but I couldn't break free. The figure, standing in the river, began drifting toward me. As it approached within a meter, I discerned its appearance. A woman with long hair, her face completely obscured by her tangled locks. Only a glimpse of her pale, bluish skin peeked through near her mouth. She continued moving closer until she stood to my left, facing me. An extraordinary fear enveloped me. My heart raced, and I felt helpless. The woman whispered, "Save me," and then vanished. With her disappearance, my paralysis lifted, and I screamed, sprinting back to my car. Despite having consumed alcohol, I drove away from the scene. Glancing in the rearview mirror, I saw the same woman chasing my car. Terrified, I swerved, and my tires slipped into a roadside ditch. As the car came to a halt, the woman pressed against my driver's side window, wailing, "Why didn't you save me?" Her mouth oozed black liquid. I lost consciousness, only to wake up to someone knocking on my window. A local farmer had found me. He helped me contact roadside assistance, and I eventually made it home safely. Since that night, I've avoided wilderness camping. Too terrifying. To this day, I still can't fathom what that woman was, but she certainly didn't belong in our world. Thank you all for watching this video. Feel free to share your thoughts and experiences in the comments section. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Also, make sure to ring the notification bell for future updates.